This is Hank from Free Podcast Tools, and today I'm going to walk you through a free editing course for an audio-only podcast. If you don't already have a DAW, a digital audio workstation that you like to use, I can suggest a free tool called Audacity. On this training, I'm on version 3.7.3. If your version is a little newer and you're watching this later on, same principles apply, and the effects are probably located in a similar place that they are on this version. First, let me give you a few tips for your pre-recording that will help you out and limit some of your post-production mistakes that you'll have to fix. First and foremost is microphone distance from the mouth. I like to be between one fist and pinky to thumb distance away from the end of the microphone. And also make sure you're talking into the end of the microphone. When you get a little too far off axis, the sound quality gets really, really bad. And if you get too far away from the microphone, the sound quality also gets really, really bad. So don't worry about having a microphone in your shot if you have a video element to your podcast. People expect it nowadays. If you're recording on an audio interface that has onboard recording, they're going to have meters on that, and you're going to want to stay in the green. Typically, green is good, yellow is getting a little close to clipping, and then red is clipping or exceeding 0 dB. But if you don't have a device like that and you're recording into the software, I like to target between negative 12 dB and negative 6 dB. I don't like to go too high up. In the old days, I used to go to negative 3 dB, but it was just too close to clipping. So I like for my peaks to be negative 6 dB because we can boost in post-production. Another tip is to always monitor your own voice. If you're monitoring your own voice at a decent level, you can hear if you start to make mistakes with wind bursts, like the plosives we call them, hitting the microphone. Also, if you're hearing yourself back and you go to reach for something and then you notice how faint you get, you notice your voice gets super faint, it kind of steers you back onto the microphone. Next, covered walls and covered windows can really help make the sound in whatever room you're trying to record in just that much better. Now, I have moving blankets up on the walls, but that's not always practical for most people. So what I try to do is, if you could create some little stand or something to put some blankets over, and they'll be directly behind the back of the microphone or in the direction that you're talking, so it doesn't bounce off hard surfaces. Curtains covering windows are helpful. Close those up when you're recording so you can stop that surface. Also, I try to stop the surface behind me from reflecting. And another sneaky reflective surface in your home studio could be your desk itself. I bought one of those mouse pads, kind of thicker one, that I lay under the keyboard and mouse, and I feel like it has helped a little bit. And lastly, when you go to record, if you keep your microphone at the gain level, you're going to set it in to reach that negative 6 to negative 12 dB, and you just stay quiet for 3 to 5 seconds at the start of your recording. You'll be able to utilize that segment of silence, of room tone, in your editing later. I'm going to show you that in this video. The first thing we'd want to do is we want to come up here to edit, head down to preferences. And in here, we would set our audio settings. So make sure whatever device you're going to be recording into is already plugged into the computer before starting it up. Now, on playback, you would choose the device that you're on. Right now, I'm on the Rodecaster Video, and this is Rodecaster Video Chat. And then the recording device would be the same device that you're recording into. All of our voices are mono, so it's fine to leave microphones on mono. When it comes to the quality, this is my personal recommendation, 48,000 hertz or 48 kilohertz. That is my project sample rate, and the default sample format, I record in 24-bit. Only if you have a device that is 32-bit capable, 32-bit float capable, you can record in that. But if you're using proper microphone technique and etc., then you are fine with 24-bit. All right, so now we would hit OK. I'll close out the file that is on the screen. We'll be using that in just a minute. But in order to record, we would simply hit this record button up here. And as you can see on the meter, we're bouncing between roughly, most of our peaks are close to -6. And some of the lower stuff is around -12. So we're good to go. And when you're finished, you would just hit the stop button. And once you're done recording, you always want to save your project. So I save my project as, so I can select a name. But I just have an acronym set up on there and then 000 because this is our pilot or promo episode. And then I would just click save because we're not exporting the MP3 at this time. We're just saving the project. All right, then we can cut into editing. The first thing I like to do is noise reduction. I like to hit noise while the file is at its lowest point. All right, let's open our actual test file. So to do that, you don't have to use open if you have something already cooking in here, because it's going to open another instance of Audacity. And we don't want that. We're going to go to import audio. And then I'm going to find my folder. I will find the file. And I'm going to open that up. So as you can see, I left a big chunk of space here at the beginning in order to have silence to go against. So the first thing I want to do is kind of impact the noise. So I'm going to take my mouse, click it here around the 5-second mark-ish, left click and hold, and then drag that all the way back to the start. And I'm going to come up to effect. And then I will come down to noise removal and noise reduction. And then I'm going to click on get noise profile. Now it has taken that little snapshot as a profile. And now I'm just going to double left click on the file itself on that specific channel. And then I will go to effect and I'll go to noise removal and repair. Noise reduction, and I'm just going to use their basic settings, which is to reduce noise by 6 dB. I don't try to go too crazy on it. You could either hit preview to kind of listen back to see if you're getting too aggressive, etc. If you got a quieter file, then I would probably do this noise reduction a little later, but I'm just showing you how I personally do it, and that is right at the start because I've recorded a fat enough signal. And then I will just click OK because I'm going to reduce by 6 dB. But if there were a little bit of background noise as far as just a computer running, etc., it's going to try to work against that sound source and get rid of it throughout the entire file. I prefer that to a noise gate. A noise gate is going to be more aggressive, and it sometimes can chop off trailing S's and N's of words. So you got to be careful with the noise gate. I personally don't use them. That's just my personal preference. So after we've done noise reduction, now I would go through and I would find all my mistakes. So let's play this back. I already recorded this earlier. Welcome to Insert Podcast Name Here, where we discuss insert topic here. I'm your host, Hank Davis. The show airs every Wednesday. For full show notes, links, and a list of all the podcast directories we're in, head to website name here. Now, on to the show. Okay, so you could hear back here, I made a faux pas and a link. So I was trying to say and a link, and I made a mistake, and it's good that I did because it's a training moment. So we could zoom in a little bit if we wanted to, and we'll just left click to get our marker where we want it, and then we will hold the left button on the mouse and we'll drag across that word and then just hit the delete key. This program also allows you to set up shortcuts, so you could set up functions to do when editing to pretty much any key on the keyboard. So keep that in mind. That's a personal choice. I'm just showing you just the basic structure of editing. One thing I wanted to quickly show you while we're in editing is if you have two speakers, so you record it on voice over IP like StreamYard or Streamlabs or somewhere where you get two or more people, you would simply go to File, obviously, and import the audio files. And in order to keep them synced up, if you want to make edits to one as far as cutting, then you're going to have to cut through the other files as well in order to maintain syncing. So I'm going to show you two things really quick. So I'm just going to try to find a spot where I can make a cut. So let's say I want to get rid of the laughter there. All right, so I'm going to left click and hold on the mouse, and then I will pull down to his track as well, and I can come across as far. I'm going to zoom in a little tighter. And I don't want to cut off the trail end of his word here if that's a word. I don't know if that's a breath or a word. But let's say I just want to get rid of this. If you hover over the edge, either side of either edge, you can hold down the left and continue to drag in or out. So it's just a bunch of laughter. Note that if you stop it, it will stop at playhead if you have it just at the base settings. There's a way to change that. But if you let the highlighted area play all the way through, it'll stay highlighted. To get rid of that, we just simply hit delete, and then I get rid of that. But what about this part here that's overdoing him here? I can just highlight that. And then up here, you can see silence audio selection. And we'll click that, and there it's gone. And I could do the same thing with this down here. If this is in the way of my speech up here, let's come up to silence audio selection and hit that there. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to get rid of something on one track, as far as cutting, you're going to have to cut through all the other tracks to keep the things in line. And then it maintains the timing of the recording. So keep this in mind. Another tip that you could use while recording is have a pen, pencil, crayon, something next to you, and jot down notes of timestamps. So 2-digit minute and 2-digit second. 00. So at 00012, I made that mistake or something like that. I don't know what it was, but jot those all down while you're recording. And then when you go back to edit after you do noise reduction, then you could go in here and you can just chop, chop, chop. Start at the end of the file and work your way back towards the beginning, because if you don't, then you're going to be messing up the timestamps as you go. So start at the end of the file and work your way to the beginning of the file. Now that we're done removing the parts that we didn't want in this, we can shortcut the process of removing all this dead space in here in between all these different words. We can do that automatically. We'll do a double left click to highlight the file. Then we'll go up to Effect, and we're going to come down to Special, and we will pull down until we find Truncate Silence. So we're going to shorten the silence. This is the default setting, which is a threshold of -20 dB, a duration of half a second, and then the action would be to truncate anything that's over that half a second down to half a second. So we'll just go with that for now, and if it sounds unnatural, we'll change it. So let's click apply and watch the file get shorter. Look at that. So let's undo. Let's come up to edit and undo, and the file was over 31 seconds. Now we'll redo that, go up to edit, then redo, and we chopped it down to just under 20 seconds. So a nice chunk taken off there. I've been on podcasts where we have cut 3 to 4 minutes off the overall file. And this is so much quicker than going through and chopping. So now let's play it back, see if it sounds natural. Welcome to Insert Podcast Name Here, where we discuss insert topic here. I'm your host, Hank Davis. The show airs every Wednesday. For full show notes, links, and a list of all the podcast directories we're in, head to website name here. Now, on to the show. I think it sounds natural in my ears. But if you think it sounds a little too tight, then you could just go back into that truncate, undo it by going to edit, undo, and then go back in there, highlight the file, go back into truncate silence, and then change it to like 0.7 or something like that. And just go from there, just until you get it to where you think it sounds natural. So in this training, I am just going to mention the principles of EQ. I am not going to go too deep into the weeds. EQing for podcasting is really more about removing stuff that sounds really harsh. Now we come into effect, go down to EQ and filters. I personally like graphic EQs because it spits out the actual numbers of the frequencies. So starts down at 20 hertz and goes all the way to 20 kilohertz, which would be 20,000 hertz. And typically sibilance is going to reside somewhere in here, in these areas up here. And when you find yours, you can just draw it down just a few dB and see if it takes away some of that veil of. But finding the sibilance can be whack-a-mole for tools like this. There are paid tools that will help you find your sibilance like that. So if you wanted to de-ess on Audacity, you can go download. There's free plugins out there, but you would have to do the search because I don't want to recommend something that is no longer around or something by the time you watch this. But Audacity allows you to bring in plugins, both paid and free ones. And there are a million de-esser plugins. So if you find that it's harsh to listen back to your audio on playback because of S's, sharp S's, and it's like pins in ears, then you may want to look for that. Or you can do the trial and error like I showed you. Depending on if you're male or female, sibilance can be in that 5, 6, 7K range-ish. Can even be different on some different voices. I think mine is roughly around 5 kilohertz. So if I just drop that down, notch that down a few dB, it can take away that veil of shushiness that goes across that can be a little grating on the ears. So EQ can be used to accentuate things as well, but I don't get into boosting the low end and all that stuff. If you try to tailor the microphone to your voice, you'll be much better off than just trying to fix everything in post. So that's why I kind of like the Shure SM7B. It's kind of a smooth, flat microphone. It really doesn't seem to accentuate a lot of the sounds that you could get from other brighter microphones that really accentuate the high end. You can look at my how-to podcast video for gear recommendations and head to the website freepodcasttools.com. Next, let's talk a little bit about compression. So one of the cool things on this program here, Audacity, is you could technically add compression while you're recording. I'm going to get rid of this for now, and I want to start a new recording. So if you come up here to the top here and you go to tracks, add new, and our voices are mono, so we will add a new mono track. And right here on the left, if you click effects, I can simply add an effect for Audacity. And on here, I wouldn't mind doing the compressor if I were struggling to keep a good dynamic range. Just the range in which, if my speaking's kind of down here and then it's way up here and then it's down here and it's fluctuating. This is when I would use this while recording. And I would not go crazy on this. So let's go to presets and settings, factory presets, and let's just see what they got here. Let's go to vocal control. So here is a ratio of 3:1, which for me, I like to be either 2:1 ratio or 3:1 ratio. So let's leave the settings on the factory and let's just record some gibberish. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Hank, and my co-host will be joining me shortly. So you see, even when I try to get really loud, it's clamping down. Those would typically be peaks. So let's take this off and I'll do the same thing and you'll see what happens. We'll get all these red lines. So let's say no effect. Let's keep recording. I'm Hank, and my co-host will be joining me shortly for the show. So you see the difference in there. We peaked here at 14 seconds. See that red line? That is going greater than 0 dB. And so before, let me back out a little bit. You can see we were taming the signal much more down. Even right here, I got a little too quiet going in there. But as you could see in the beginning, I was getting a little loud, and it's still clamping those down. They look fairly even. While these look even, they're getting out of control. They're going towards 0 dB way too much. So that's essentially what a compressor can help do. Now you can put it on the channel and do it here, or if you're doing fine, staying within your ranges of minus 6 dB and minus 12 dB, then you can do it in post-production. Let's undo that last one. Go on here and go to Effect, Volume and Compression, and we could hit Compressor. And you see we have the same ones that we could do here. Go through here and pick one that would make sense. So we have one called Podcast Radio. I wish I would have saw that earlier. So let's take a peek at this one. Let me apply it. So as you can see, it just barely affects the signal. All right, let's zoom in a little bit. All right, so let's undo the compressor, and you see it affecting the dynamics just a little bit. Watch at the beginning of the file. You see it just clamping down a little bit on the dynamic range. And that's all it's for, is just to tame these dynamic ranges. And it can give you a little bit of a polished sound if you don't overdo it. So I always suggest 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 compression. I never go beyond that. And personally, I either do it on the channel while recording or in post-production. One or the other. I don't do both. But you'll find a lot of people out there that compress multiple times. Another form of compression is called a peak limiter, and we hope to never have to use that if we've done a good job setting up for our recording, staying in between our levels, etc. But I'll just show you what that can do. We'll blow this track out. I'm just going to amplify this track so it's blown out. Let me go a little bit higher than that. Let's go above 0. What the heck? So we'll do allow clipping, and we'll just go up like that. So you see that red line there, we've clipped. So a peak limiter, while it can tame stuff like that, that signal is already blown out. So it may not work as well as we would hope it to. So let's listen and see if we can hear that clip. Hank. So you see up here, when we hit that red line, it goes over 0. Hank, you don't hear the distortion because it's just a split second on there. But if we select this file, double left click, and we go to Effect, Volume and Compression, and we use the limiter, and we just tried to limit, not to 5 dB, but to, let's say -1. And then you see that went away. So it's just limiting the range in which it does. It's just an ultra aggressive compressor when it comes to peaking past 0. But you just don't want to peak because it blows out the audio on 24-bit and 16-bit recordings. It blows out the audio to a level in which you can't recover it without having some sort of distortion. That's where 32-bit recording, if you've heard of that, comes into play. It allows you to restore blown out audio. So if I record something that was 5 dB over 0, I can still recover that with 32-bit recorders, but they're just not as widely prevalent in home studios right now. I mean, they're getting there, but not quite just yet. The moral of the story is use good technique when setting up in the first place, and you don't have to worry about all these fixes in post. All right, let's close that out and let's get our fake podcast promo back imported here by going to File, Import Audio, and we'll go to here and get that file in here. So this is our little fake file we made earlier, a little fake intro. What level does our podcast need to be produced at? Unfortunately, there are 2 prevailing standards that are out there, and one is Spotify's, at minus 14 LUFS stereo. Now, there's a conversion you'll have to do if you go mono. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But stereo front, minus 14 LUFS. So loudness units full scale. And then if you listen to Apple Podcasts, I don't know, they've been around since pretty much the beginning. They recommend minus 16 LUFS. And that's what I do. I've done minus 16 since it became a thing years and years and years and years ago. And even though minus 14 is just a little bit louder, I kind of don't care. I'm sticking with 16. You can choose what you want. But you need to know this. If you save your file in stereo, even though your voice is mono, if you have music, sound effects, etc., if you save the file in stereo, then you're going to be targeting either the minus 14 or the minus 16, in my case, LUFS. If you save your file in mono, that's going to change. It's either going to be minus 17 LUFS or minus 19 LUFS. So it'll be a 3 dB difference if you switch to mono, because they'll balance out to be the exact same thing. So minus 14 LUFS stereo is minus 17 LUFS mono, and minus 16 LUF stereo is minus 19 LUFS mono. So before we wrap this up and import music and export the file, let's double left click on the file. Let's go to Effect. Let's go to Volume and Compression, Loudness Normalization. I want to make sure I get my voice where it needs to be before I add my music, because I don't want the disparity in my voice and the music to change the dynamic of the final product. So I'm going to get my voice up to minus 19 LUFS because it is a mono file currently, and that would be minus 16 LUFS stereo. So you see it punched it up just a little bit. Now we're going to import our audio, and we go to File, Import Audio, and find it, and then get it in here. And then up here, once the file's selected, I personally like using the envelope tool up here. And then when we click that, it adds these lines across the top here. Now, if I grab it in the middle here, left click and hold, I can lower the volume, I can raise the volume, I can mess with it like that. So let's bring it on down a little bit so it's kind of low. And then if the front here wasn't already kind of fading in, I could start up here at the front, left click and hold, and kind of see how that fades in a little bit. Then we can just do a playback of the file. Welcome to Insert Podcast Name Here, where we discuss insert topic here. I'm your host, Hank Davis. The show airs every Wednesday. For full show notes, links, and a list of all the podcast directories we're in, head to website name here. Now, on to the show. So you see that timed up pretty good. And you can just fade out at the end too. Mine was already set up that way and stuff. So if you think the middle in here is just a little too loud still, you could just get back on that point and come down a little bit more. And then the only thing is you got to get off this envelope tool and back over to the selection tool just to get rid of those lines so you don't accidentally change volumes again. To me, it was really close that I might keep it that way, or I might bring that center down just another dB or so. But that's just to your taste. All right, so now that I have both files roughly where I want them, they're in the ballpark. In order to select all, when you have multiple tracks, you can come up here to the select button and you can select all. And now under tracks, I want to mix and render. And you see that? We have mixed it down to one stereo track. It's going to affect the volume just a little bit. We're going to come up to effect while the track is selected. We're going to go to volume compression, and we're going to go to normalize loudness again. And we click that and you see it affected it just a little bit more. We combine those files and it just boosted up just a little bit more. So now let's do a playback. Welcome to Insert Podcast Name Here, where we discuss insert topic here. I'm your host, Hank Davis. The show airs every Wednesday. For full show notes, links, and a list of all the podcast directories we're in, head to website name here. Now, on to the show. it would be, like I said earlier, it would be your call if you wanted the music to come down a little bit more, not, etc. This is just a demonstration. So now we have a file that is minus 16 LUFS stereo. We are still in the working zone here, so we're going to now export this as an MP3 file. So we go to File, Export Audio. We're going to choose MP3 as the format, stereo, sample rate 48,000 hertz, constant bit rate 128 kbps. I think this strikes a good balance of high quality stereo file with the file being relatively small. You could get away with 96 kbps, but I personally always stick with 128. There's even people that go higher. They go up to 192. I don't do that. We want to export the entire file. And we're going to do it right here. It's going to give us a warning that I already have that file name in here because I created it earlier. We'll just say, yes, we want to overwrite it. And it writes it very, very fast. So now we have our full podcast file out there. I'm going to put a link in the description to Apple Podcasts specifications for what they want you to export and upload to your media host that gets served to them. As I've stated throughout this, you can play around with this. There's going to be many people that disagree with my methods. However, I have been doing this for a long, long time, since 2006, and this is more along the lines of what works best for me. There's one more tool I want to quickly show you, and it can take all that post-production stuff down to a quicker step. Let's get back on the screen here. Let's close out our little mix here. Let's make our new recording. This is a test. This is a test, an emergency podcast recording test. This is only a test. All right, so let's export this little file here. Let's export the audio as a WAV file under Format. And we'll keep all our other settings just fine. We'll just, it's a single voice, but we're going to pretend like this was a full podcast, and we'll save it as stereo. All right, let's change that name to test, 48,000 hertz, 24-bit entire project. All right, there's a free little piece of software out there that's super lightweight, and if I could see it behind my picture, it is called the Levelator. You can still find this out and about there. It works for, I believe, Windows and Mac, and possibly Linux, but for sure Windows and Mac. All right, so now let's bring up our folder. Let's refresh that. So we have that little test file. We haven't done anything to it. We just recorded it really quick. Now we can just drag our little file into the Levelator, and it's going to spit us out a file that says our name dot output. All right, so let's import that file. Let's go to File, Import, Audio, so you can see it side by side. And the Levelator is down at the bottom, and our original file is up at the top. And let's mute our original file. This is a test. This is a test. So the Levelator is really good at leveling, as the name implies, two different sound signals or finishing your audio if you choose to use it in that way. There's a lot of YouTubers and podcasters that I personally know that finish their audio in that little piece of software right there. I use it because I have two speakers. One is up here and the other one's way down here. And I use it to level them out. I'll show you an example really, really quick. Let's close this out. Let's unmute that. Let's take this section in the front here, and let's go to Volume, Amplify, and let's bring it down. Instead of bringing it up, let's bring it down almost 10 dB. So look at how terrible that looks. So you'll run into situations if you have somebody coming to you via a voice over IP program, and you could sound really good and they sound terrible, like as far as volume wise. So let's export this file out, and we're going to export it out. Let's call it Lev, L-E-V, as a wave. We'll just leave it in mono for now. Now let's go back to the Levelator, And then let's bring that file over, and we just drag it from our folder right in there and drop it in there. And it's going to spit out a file. All right, so let's import that file, and you're going to see the magic of the levelator. Look at that. That's what the levelator's for. That's why it's so good, is it does a really good job of balancing audio out. That's going to do it for the how to edit video. I'm just trying to give you the overarching principles. You can tweak anything you need to tweak, and you can do some trial and error on some other things that you want to do differently. And remember, there's going to be a lot of people that do this process totally different than the way I've shown you. I'm just teaching you what has worked for me for the past 19 years. All right, if you haven't checked out my how-to podcast series, check that out either on YouTube or at the website freepodcasttools.com. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for the latest news, reviews, previews of equipment, and much more. As always, thank you.